Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovation's ReinventED Legal Business, the case studies. In this series, as you know, we're meeting with the thought leaders and the doers in the space of doing law differently, doing legal practice differently. And we're really delighted today to welcome to this session and to this series, Demetrio Zema, who is the founder and problem solver at Law Squared. And for those of you in Australia that know Law Squared, you'll also know that it's an amazing firm led by amazing people and doing amazing things. And Demetrio is going to tell you all about that in just one moment. So again, really delighted to have you here, very excited about this series, and even more excited to welcome back to the centre and to this series, Demetrio Zema. Over to you, Demetrio.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Terri, and thanks everyone for joining and all those watching it. Really appreciate it. Certainly here to walk you through the Law Squared journey and tell you a bit about Law Squared and what we do, and go through some of our service offerings, some of our teams, certainly some technology products that we work on. And really it's an opportunity for people to ask questions and get some insights from me about what it is that we do at Law Squared and why it is that we exist. And certainly something that I'm very passionate about, which is changing the conversation that people are having about lawyers. And that really is the foundation in which Law Squared was founded. So yeah, please ask questions as we go along. Terri, I believe, will be moderating those questions and throwing them at me. So please do. Really want this to be an informative session and for people to be able to feel comfortable in asking any question they might feel they want answered. So who are we? Law Squared is a new law firm, and no doubt we've all heard the term new law, and there's some confusion sometimes about what new law means. But for me, what's really important is that Law Squared is an alternative to the traditional law firm model. It is not necessarily a disruptor. It is not necessarily the only option forward. It is absolutely an alternative both for lawyers and also for clients. Law Squared, founded in 2016. I started by myself out of a co-working space here in Melbourne. And over the last 4.5 years, we have grown to a team of about 22 now, working with small businesses, large businesses, ASX-listed companies, all the way through to multinationals. And it has been an absolutely tremendous journey and ride over those last 4.5 years, and certainly some really exciting things to come. A bit about me and my background. I was a commercial insurance litigation lawyer. I started my career at a national insurance firm, having done high volume litigation primarily. And about 3.5 years into that initial journey, I became really worn out and really tired and pretty disgruntled as a lawyer, if I'm honest. I felt that I was being punished for being a hard worker and did many hours and really wanted to climb the ladder of corporate law, and felt that there had to be something else out there. And so I changed law firms thinking that it was going to make a difference, and perhaps it was a cultural thing, or maybe it was just working in insurance litigation that I didn't like. And so I really thought maybe switching firms would make a difference. Should also say at about that time, it's about that 3-year PQE where we see most lawyers get the itch. They either end up going in-house or they end up leaving the law altogether. And so it was definitely around that time I had friends and colleagues of mine who were all thinking about what they were going to do with their careers. So I changed law firms thinking it was going to be different. And sure enough, 2 and a bit years after that, I realized it really wasn't any different. And I wanted to practice law in a different way. And I didn't want to engage with clients in the way that a firm expected me to engage with clients. And I was sick of being held accountable based on financial metrics alone. I was fortunate in that whilst I was a lawyer, I had started a number of businesses, some successes, some failures. And so I had some business nous and acumen behind me to kind of think about, well, what does it mean to actually build a new business from scratch? And we say that Law Squared is a business that delivers legal services, which is different to just being a law firm. And again, like we said earlier, fast forward 4.5 years, the business sure has evolved to what we now think is one of Australia's leading new law firms. And certainly pushing the boundaries in terms of legal innovation, technology, but also primarily focused around that customer and client engagement. So our why. Why do we exist? We exist to create a true alternative to the traditional law firm model. And that is by providing effective and efficient legal services suited to our clients' needs. So you might be looking at that and being like, that's every other law firm. But actually, it really isn't. We have some really key metrics and values in place which do put us in a very different category to our traditional law firms. So just there are three key pillars there that we look at. We really want to provide efficient and fit-for-purpose legal and commercial outcomes for clients. We really aim to communicate in a clear, efficient, and effective manner with our clients. And we really do provide cost certainty on our legal and commercial advice. So Law Squared does not operate on a time or hourly billing model. We do not do timesheets internally or externally. We don't have hourly rates at all. It is wholly a value price billing model or a fixed fee model. We also have our entire litigation Australia-wide on a fixed fee model as well. So we're probably one of the only very few firms of the size of which we are that doesn't have any form of time as a metric for both financial recognition, but also from a productivity perspective as well, which I think is probably one of our key leading and differentiating factors. Just to give you a bit of a snapshot of the current state of play of Law Squared. So we've got 3 offices. We're in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. For those of you in Melbourne, you know that we're pretty limited here at the moment, and unfortunately, we've been working from home since about the 18th of March, I think it is. So it's been a long time since we've all been together in an office. For those who know me, know that I love to travel and get to Sydney and Brisbane every week. And so to not have been able to do that over the last few months has been rather challenging, but it's been great to see our teams continue to thrive. And our Brisbane team actually have just moved offices, which has been great, but unfortunately haven't been able to head up and spend some time with them. We have 4 core legal practice units, and that is a commercial team, a corporate team, a disputes and litigation team, and an employment workplace relations team. And I'll go through each of those teams shortly. We have a team of 20. We have just hired another 2 people, which is a bit exciting, and they're both starting on the 26th of October. So that'll take our team to 22. We've been really fortunate to work with many clients. And like I said, when we first started, everything from small businesses all the way through to ASX listed and multinational companies. And it's been a really exciting journey, particularly working with some of those smaller businesses and seeing them go along their growth journey and to be part of their story. One key thing that I love about the business, and certainly from an accountability perspective, I put in place about 2.5 years ago an advisory board structure. So when we look at the structure of Law Squared as a law firm or as a business, it is a corporate model. So there is a director, which is myself, and then a shareholder. We do not have an equity partnership model. So it really is based on a corporate foundations. And I started the firm by myself, and I felt that I had no accountability. It was just me, ideas, things I wanted to execute, and a business plan that I wanted to execute. But I didn't really have anybody keeping me accountable other than my team. And so I thought a way to keep myself accountable and really push the boundaries of what we were trying to achieve was to put in place an advisory board. And so we have 5 advisory board members. We meet on a monthly basis and we treat them just like an ordinary board. We give them board reports, full financials, and we pay them as well. So it is a paid advisory board, and one that keeps me very honest and very accountable, and is definitely one of the key pillars that keep us as a really strong business, but also keeps me very accountable as a founder. We work with many entrepreneurs who unfortunately don't keep themselves accountable and sometimes go off on tangents, which can be to the business's detriment. And so I've been really pleased to see the great impact that our advisory board has had and continues to have on the business, and certainly happy to answer any questions that people might have about that. One of the key things about our advisory board is that they are not lawyers. So we have specifically chosen people who come from outside of the legal industry. And the only caveat to that is Liz Harris, who many of you may know, who's one of the leading cost consultants and leading thought leaders on value billing and value pricing here in Australia. She is probably the only legally trained person on our advisory board. The others range from 2 very well-accomplished entrepreneurs, one quite young and one a bit older, another being a former managing director of an ASX top 20 listed company, and another being a chief operating officer of a very large company here in Australia. So again, a very diverse mix of people, none of which, again, other than Liz, who come from a legal background, which really brings some insights into the business. This is a bit of a matrix, and excuse my poor paint skills here in drafting this, but one thing that Law Squared is very proud of is that we don't have a hierarchical structure. And so we believe in what we call a cluster model, in that each of our teams work together as a collective rather than a top-down heavy approach. So we don't have the partner, senior associate, associate lawyer, junior lawyer model. We do have that everyone in the legal team is a lawyer, as opposed to having that hierarchy. It means it does force and encourage a lot, I shouldn't say force, but does certainly encourage a lot of collaboration. It means that people are working actively together as opposed to working against each other. We see, unfortunately, traditional law firms, the path to leadership, which can be quite brutal, and people believing that they must follow the traditional path in order to achieve success. That's not a model that we subscribe to at Law Squared, and we do believe that actually working together is what's going to help us achieve our goals. And that is our goals collectively as a firm, but also our individual goals, which, importantly, again, are not financial based. So just to give a bit of an idea here, so we really have 5 key business units. One, again, the 4 legal teams being the peach on the outside, and then right in the heart of that being our operations team. Now, our operations team is not like a traditional support team structure. We don't have the usual secretaries and the like that we see in traditional law firms. Rather, our operations team is a hub that does some really fantastic things. We have a financial accountant in there. It is led by a COO. We have a head of partnerships and community. We have a marketing coordinator in there. We have a business analyst. And it is a really strong team that does supplement the rest of the legal team in achieving our strategic goals and vision. How does this work in practice, you might be wondering? Well, each of those legal teams has about 3 or 4 lawyers in each, and it does mean that they work collaboratively together. They each are responsible for getting work, looking after work, supporting each other in getting the work done, but also working with me to achieve each of those 3 things. In traditional law firms, we often have silos of people, and some of you may have heard the terms finders, minders, and grinders. It's not a term that I particularly like, but it is a way to differentiate what we see in traditional law firms. What we believe, our lawyers at Law Squared, is that they are all 3 of those things. We don't want just people who want to just do the work, and we don't want people who just want to get the work. We really want people who enjoy being lawyers, who enjoy working with clients, and who enjoy working with each other and supporting others in terms of their own career progression. And that's something that's been really important, and I think a really key distinguishing factor of ours as a part of our growth journey. So hopefully that gives a bit of an idea in terms of a structure. It isn't what you would expect to see in terms of the traditional partnership model of one person at the top and everyone streaming down. It really is a circular and collaborative minded workplace. Sometimes people look at this and say, oh, it looks a bit utopian, how does it work in practice? But I can assure you it is definitely one of the most cohesive businesses I've ever been a part of. And it's really driven by an extremely positive culture. And I think that is because everyone sees each other as peers, as opposed to seeing somebody else as below them. And that is one really important distinguishing factor of ours at Law Squared. What I propose to do now is just go through each of the 4 legal teams, give you a bit of an insight into some of the work that they do. And then what we might do is see if there's any questions at that point before I continue on. So just to give an idea in terms of our commercial team, we've got some fantastic lawyers in that team, and we've grown that team tremendously actually during COVID. In fact, it's doubled in size over the last 6 months. So it just shows the level of work that team continues to get and be known for in this space, which has just been absolutely fantastic. So really the 5 key areas that we focus on in our commercial team are regulatory advice and compliance, competition and consumer advice, leasing matters, drafting document and negotiations, and privacy IP. Each of the lawyers in the team really do have a specialized focus for each of those areas, and therefore that allows them to work quite well together. In terms of our corporate team, this is our transaction-based team primarily. Again, there are 6 things that this team really focus on. That ranges from capital raising and equity fundraising, key business documents or head office advisory, if you like, sale, purchase and business advice, risk management, certainly a lot of company setups and restructuring, working with a number of foreign entities, particularly setting up subsidiaries here in Australia. And again, the corporate advisory piece, doing a lot of work with directors, shareholders, acting as company secretary for a number of businesses as well. Our fourth team is a really fun team, and that is our employment and workplace relations team. One important thing about this team is that they will only act for employers. We do not do employee work. We see some firms dabble in both, and others are very specific in which side of the coin they sit on, but certainly from our perspective, we will act for corporates and businesses. It's very rare that we will at all act for individuals, even from a director capacity, or if we have a one person come to us as a client. Often we won't do that work, and we'll really focus on working with the corporates and the businesses looking to grow their businesses or do something, as opposed to just acting for individuals. So from our employment team, the three core areas of that, if you like, are the hiring, managing and firing of staff. And certainly under that comes the litigation piece, if there is any. Our team is absolutely experts in child safety and have done a lot of child safety work, particularly in schools and sporting organisations. Our team also do quite a lot of enterprise bargaining agreements. So working with unions, for example, or large not-for-profits or large consolidated groups in terms of their enterprise bargaining agreements. And like I said earlier, the three core areas of hiring, managing and firing employees. The final team, and certainly not the least fun team, but is our disputes and litigations team. And again, acting for corporates primarily, this is what we see as high volume litigation. So it is everything from acting for insurers, doing insurance and subrogation proceedings, commercial contractual disputes, debt and asset recovery, and also quite a lot of insolvency litigation. Our team do act on a national basis, so it doesn't matter where our team sits, whether it's in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, they all do act on a national basis. And yeah, I think that's all. The other thing I can add about our disputes and litigation team, like I said earlier, was around our fixed fee litigation. So we're probably one of the very few firms nationally who do offer an absolute fixed cost for litigation, and we do that in stages. So it means that their business always aware of what their potential exposures are, or absolutely maximum exposure in any litigation proceedings. Before I head to the products and services piece, Terri, did you want to ask any questions, or are you happy for me to continue on?
I've got one quick question, Demetrio. I wouldn't mind if you kind of answer it here. And it's one around the fixed fee stuff, and I guess one a bit around scoping and communication. So I'm just going to read it out for you, probably easiest. If you need to attend to a client who keeps calling you and asks questions and you had to spend additional time on the matter, do you still keep with the agreed fixed price? And how do you deal with the situation to control the time spent in that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's really a great question, and one that we look at a lot and one that we talk about a lot. And when we are pricing a matter or scoping a matter, it's really important that we say that our team have this philosophy that they never price alone, and they always price with somebody else. And what we go through a series of questions, and one of them is actually pricing the client. So, is this going to be a high hand-holding client or a low hand-holding client? Is this somebody we've acted for before? What is the urgency around this? What is the value to the client? And then that assists us in then working out, well, what are the levers up or down as a result? We often also put in terms of our proposals a couple of things. If it's a document review, for example, or we're working on building a document for a client, we will set the number of revisions, and then we'll have a separate fee for any additions thereafter. Also in things like our corporate work, where there is a lot of transactions, there is a lot of back and forth, we will always place a contingency fee, and that's not a success fee. That is a, if this and this happens, which requires further work, then there is an additional fee, and we set what that fee is up front. The reality with value pricing is that sometimes you get it wrong, and you've just got to wear that and own that and be okay with that. Because of the nature of our clients, it is often quite ongoing work and ongoing relationships, and therefore you take a swings and roundabouts approach. That is, sometimes you do better out of the file, sometimes you don't, but overall you've got to ensure the firm continues to be profitable. The next question that might flow from that is, well, how do you ensure you're profitable if you're not tracking time? And so I say to that, well, actually time isn't a true measure of your profitability because you're placing an arbitrary figure on what that time is worth. And so long as you can look at your overall expenses for that team and then look at the amount which you wish to make on top of that from a profit perspective, if the team are working towards a collective budget and goal, then actually that is a determiner of success, as opposed to whether one file took you 10 hours and therefore that 10 hours at $500 an hour became profitable or not. So it's a really important distinction there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just again, to revisit a little bit or re-emphasize on that question, that kind of discussion, the scoping and the very close discussion around that with the client and the ongoing communication with the client, really critical on the fixed fee aspect of it. Yeah.
Definitely. You've got to have that conversation up front. And one thing that we're very transparent about is that cost piece, that value piece. And I can tell you in, 4.5 years and 500 plus clients later, we've had 3 cost disputes. And each of the cost disputes related to actually people who couldn't afford to pay rather than actual disputes. In my previous firms, I'd done the debt recovery for the business and there was always 40, 50 ongoing files because there was always cost disputes in law firms. So I think there's something to be said just in the time that you save in any of those things by having very upfront conversations with clients around what the cost expectations are, setting out very clear scopes, because then there is a deliverable based on that amount and then there is no dispute. And that's something that we've been really proud of as a business.
Yeah, and absolutely. And in those sort of matters, it becomes almost a hidden cost, doesn't it? Because no one's tracking the time if that's what you've got to do on what you spend in those sort of situations. So, yeah. I'll leave you to carry on. I've got a few more questions for you, but I'll let you keep going and then I'll come back to them.
Yeah, no worries at all. Well, you can see that, can't you? Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so the next is just some of our products and services, and certainly things that we love to champion at Law Squared. And so we have 3 subcategories, if you like, at Law Squared. And one is LSAS, so Law Squared as a Service. The other is Q by Law Squared, and the third is Employment by Law Squared. I'll touch on LSAS, or Law Squared as a Service, first. It's one of our most thriving areas of the business at the moment, and certainly one that we absolutely love and has been such a great initiative that was launched about 12 months ago. So Law Squared as a Service is essentially our take on outsourced legal counsel. It is offering in-house counsels and businesses a solution for their day-to-day legal needs. What we do in this capacity is either act as the general counsel for a certain business, or we can act as a support for the general counsel or their legal team. We've been very fortunate to work with very large businesses and their teams in an LSAS capacity. What's really important about Law Squared as a Service is that this is not a secondee opportunity, or this is not a placement lawyer. This is an extension of your team or our firm becoming a legal counsel for a business. And you might be asking, why would a business engage a law firm to become its general counsel? And so based on our model, what we do is we have a key account holder, or the key legal person who might be managing that client. And then what they get to do is they get to leverage each of the 4 legal teams. So if one of our commercial lawyers is managing the client and there is an employee query, or there is a litigation dispute, or there is indeed a transaction that needs to take place, one of the benefits of Law Squared as a Service is that the business has already paid that one cost for that lawyer, and therefore they get access to all 4 legal teams. What we see in a lot of general counsel models is that, particularly for smaller businesses, say that $10 to $30 million revenue businesses, is that the general counsel is expected to know everything. And so often they're commercial lawyers, but they don't have employment experience, they don't have litigation experience, they don't have corporate experience. And so they end up actually briefing out quite a lot of their work. What Law Squared as a Service seeks to do is to reduce the amount of work that businesses need to brief out. It therefore reduces their legal spend and gives them cost certainty in that approach. So it's been a really fantastic legal subscription service, and very fortunate to have grown our commercial team as a result of some really great successes out of Law Squared as a Service. The second kind of product and service offering is Q by Law Squared, and Q by Law Squared is a technology product primarily built around early stage startups. So when I started the business in 2016, I was working with a lot of similar age people. I was 28 at the time and working out of co-working spaces, working in innovation hubs, partnering with accelerator programs and incubator programs, and therefore doing a lot of early stage startup work. One of the barriers for early stage startup is obviously cost. And so they, first of all, don't see value in legal services. And second, they don't want to pay for anything more than what they think they can just get a template online. what we did at Law Squared as a Service was build a technology platform which allowed businesses to, using some pretty simple automation, to be honest, to build out some specific documents, but that were customized for them. And so unlike other download or pay-as-you-go template arrangements, the way the Q by Law Squared works was that it's a bit of a process. You came in, the business comes in, has a discussion with one of our lawyers. The lawyer then approves that this is the kind of business that is suited for Q by Law Squared. There are then a series of automation bots which are released based on the documents in which that business requires. That document then comes back to a lawyer for review, and the lawyer has to approve it before it is then finalized and sent to a client. This means that actually the client is getting the correct type of document and what they want, as opposed to just a document that they think that they need. And a good example behind that is there are many early stage startups that come to us or have come to us in the past and said, oh, we need a partnership agreement. Well, actually 9 out of 10 of these businesses never needed a partnership agreement. What they needed was a shareholders agreement. And it might sound simple, but there is quite a big legal difference, as we're all aware, between a partnership agreement and a shareholders agreement. If we just simply had a button on our website that said partnership agreement, you would have sold hundreds of them, but you're actually selling the wrong thing. What we wanted to be sure was that businesses that came through Q by Law Squared were getting the relevant service that they needed and they desired, but importantly, it was a cost-effective solution for them and one that would give them a legal document that they could use and enforce moving forward. The third is employment by Law Squared. About 2 and a bit years ago, we were really fortunate to bring on 2 employment lawyers from another law firm here in Melbourne, and Catherine and Andrew Brooks, who are part of our employment team now, along with Grace, really came up with this idea around building a platform and a portal for a couple of things. One, a bunch of resources. So giving businesses the tools and resources they need around policies, guides for hiring, managing, and firing employees. What they really want to do was create a tool that allowed businesses to self-assess themselves on how they rated as an employer. And so we built this tool, which can be accessed via the Employment by Law Squared website, which allows a business to answer about 28 to 30 questions. And what happens at the end of that process is that a report is generated, a really beautiful PDF report that can be used by management or HR professionals, or certainly even presented to a board. And it gives businesses a grading on how they rate as an employer, be it A, B, or C. But what's important is that rather than saying, come to Law Squared to fix all these things, it gives you the resources in order to bolster up your business from a HR or employment perspective. For example, it might ask things, how often do you review your employment contracts? When was the last time you looked at your H&S policy? What is your induction process like? There is a series of questions that are asked, and it allows people to grade themselves, which we've had a lot of success from people and businesses being able to go through the Employment by Law Squared document process to understand what rating they are, which has been really great. Just to give an indication in terms of some of the clients and partners that we work with at Law Squared, we've been really fortunate to work with some household brand names, which you can see on the slide here, and it varies across all different industries. So whilst we primarily act for technology businesses, there are certainly a variety of different businesses in which we act for and certainly have great ongoing relationships with. And this also includes clients who are on our Law Squared as a Service engagement. A little controversial quote, but it kind of pretty much sums up my view on how Law Squared is different to traditional law firms and our approach to the way that we can be different in the legal industry. And so Banksy, obviously a very well known artist, this quote that I absolutely love, which is think outside the box, crack the box and take a effing sharp knife to it. And that really is the approach in terms of how do we change the way that lawyers are engaging with clients and how do we change the way that law firms are operating and thinking. I'm really proud that we have such a strong operations team, for example, because each of the members of that team do not come from law, and therefore they bring with them something completely different, something completely new, and they don't bring that same old thinking of like, oh, well, this is what my old firm did, as opposed to they will look for efficiencies and greater ways to work that are not the same as what other law firms do. And that is, again, similar in relation to our advisory board. When we look at the advisory board members and the insights that they give, it really is powerful to have people who are outside of law to give you insights into what the future of law really could be and should be looking like. So that really is my overview, and certainly, Terri, happy to answer any questions.
I have a few for you, and just going to redirect folks again to that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions too. And the first one is just in the stuff that you've just covered, Demetrio, and that is, I guess, this mix between what would be considered to be a slightly more traditional model of law firm, the legal advice firm, combined with the packaging or productization of some services. And I'm just kind of wondering, sometimes I think that's almost seen as a tension. So I guess that's one part of the question. But the other one is, you know, if you're sitting here today thinking about this stuff, how do you start the process of thinking about what can I productize? Should I productize? Does that even make sense? And combining it with the first part of the question, how do I kind of make this mix work?
Yeah, and I think you've actually, the key part of that is like, should I productize it? You know, there's a lot of noise, as you know better than I do, Terri, around legal innovation and legal technology, right? Like everyone talks about it, everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, but we all know that actually, you know, there are some really great examples of what legal technology and innovation is doing. And there is the practicality of how it actually operates from a firm and client perspective. Where I think we see a big gap in legal technology in this country is that it services law firms or it services clients. Very few legal technology and innovation products has actually found a way to work with both. And so the challenge then becomes, from a law firm perspective, is I've got to sell this product to my client and that is an efficiency, or similarly the client needs to sell it to their law firm as one. And we see that a lot with the in-house counsel technologies, for example, because very rarely pitched to both sides. It's only pitched to one, which is probably one of the biggest barriers I see from a legal technology perspective. In terms of a productization piece, you've really got to work out, is it worth it? And is it something that there is value in it for the client? Just because there's value in it for the law firm or the lawyer doesn't mean there's value in it for the client. And it's definitely one thing that we have always framed about, like, is this something that a client will want, or is it something that a client will use, even if it makes our life easier? And so we see this, for example, with Q by Law Squared, the productization of those very, you know, relatively simple documents, if you like, because they are stripped down documents. They're in no way complex. The shareholders agreement, for example, through Q by Law Squared, is not a shareholders agreement that I would say you give to investors when you're about to raise. But it is a shareholders agreement that you put in place when two friends who have gone to an event over the weekend decide to come up with a business, then want to invest, you know, $1,000 in putting together a shareholders agreement that gets them through the next 12 months as they work out if this is something that they want to do. Obviously, what that does is it reduces time and therefore reduces efficiencies and, increases efficiencies, and you can reduce the cost as a result of that. And there's some of the productization thinkings that I think you need to do when operating a law firm or any form of legal services, rather than just saying, oh, well, this is going to be quicker and this is going to be easier, but actually is it something that the client wants?
And I guess so, it's bringing people to you earlier, isn't it? Because, you know, I guess very often we find that folks come to us quite a bit down the track, almost when they're in trouble, where it would have been great had they kind of been on board earlier on, but it's hard to know that it's something that you need legal advice on if you're not a lawyer. So it seems that it's servicing that aspect of it as well, right?
Yeah, it's very reactive. I mean, people come to lawyers as a reactive measure as opposed to proactive. And certainly one of the messages that we've always pushed out around adding value, so doing webinars, seminars, talks, discussions, allows people to feel like they can actively come to a lawyer comfortably. And that is because the mindset of, if I go to a lawyer, it's going to be expensive. And therefore only go to them when it's, you know, going to be bad, or when it's wrong, or when I can't do it myself. And so part of that narrative of changing the conversation that people are having about lawyers is to give people the confidence to actually pick up the phone, know they're not going to be charged for the 6-minute increment, to have a conversation and say, this is what I'm thinking. Can you give me some insights?
Yeah.
And lawyers traditionally are so risk adverse that they're scared to even have that conversation because it could be construed as advice, which could be, you know, seen and gone against them. We really encourage all of our lawyers to really have open conversations with clients around that and build that trust and build that value and articulate the value, because then the client will just come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I think there's a huge fear around, you know, as soon as someone answers the phone, I'm on the clock.
Yeah.
I just think it's a huge one that we've kind of created for ourselves in the industry, unfortunately. I've got a question here for you about, I guess, decision-making within the firm. So again, I'll just kind of read it to you. As the founder of the firm and the leader, how are decisions made?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And those who know me know that I'm quite a consultative and inclusive leader. So part of our cluster-based model approach means that, depending obviously on what the decision is, but it really is an ongoing discussion with the team and getting insights from the team before an ultimate decision is made. We have this saying at Law Square that everyone has a voice and everyone has the opinion. And even if a decision is made that is adverse to that opinion, we respect the fact that decision has been made because it has been made for the collective. So, for example, we've had some recent conversations around actually the good conversation we had is around the removal of titles. So that wasn't a decision that I just kind of said one day, actually, no, we're removing titles. It was something that sat uneasy with me about the fact that here we are talking about being a new law firm, being progressive, empowering everybody to be able to make decisions. Yet we had this kind of unclear, not very, normal structure, if you like, of titles. And it was just a title rather than having any meaning behind that title. And so, part of one of our strategy days, we had a really robust conversation as a team over Zoom, actually, funny enough, because it was early into the COVID days. And I merely presented a paper to everyone. It was a 2-page paper, which had a series of discussion points and some options. And after a really robust conversation, it was agreed, actually, that titles weren't important to the team as a collective, and that this is what they wanted to have going forward. And it was decided as a team that collective titles were descriptive titles were what people wanted. So commercial lawyer, corporate lawyer, as opposed to having the traditional hierarchical structure, which again is just a good example of that piece. Another recent example of a really big, and these are big decisions in the business, right, which you ordinarily wouldn't have a consultative process. The other one is around our office. We've been recently having some conversations about our Melbourne office. What does it look like in the future? Do we want an office? Are we going to stay in the office that we're in? Do we want a new office? Similarly, I put together a paper. We had a really robust conversation as a team. And we've actually decided to let our Melbourne office go for the time being because no one can see us being back in the office until probably early next year. But at the same time, we've had a discussion around what our new office is going to look like and where do people want it to be and what are some of the core things that people wanted in it. And we are in the process of finalising a new heads of agreement for a new office that is in line with the things that people wanted. That works now because we are the size at which we are. If we were double the size, I'm not quite sure that that would be the same process. But to be honest, I'm not quite sure we want to be double the size of where we are right now. We are in a really fortunate position as a business where it is a very positive, cohesive team and culture where people really do respect each other and each other's views and values. And that is something that is really important to me. So that's definitely how our decisions are made. It's a very consultative process. And ultimately, I will make that decision, but certainly informed by what the team's desires are.
Yeah, but I think it pulls out a couple of really important things that many important things, but a couple of them. I guess it's that you've got the benefit in those discussions, which I'm assuming are held pretty regularly, of a lot of different points of view, which must be tremendously helpful in terms of informing your own thinking, quite apart from everyone else's there. But the thing that was particularly struck me as you were speaking was that it's also allowing you to inject into your business an agility and adaptability that wouldn't otherwise be available had you or were you not having those discussions and meetings. Is that a fair comment as well?
Absolutely. But also I think what it gives you is buy-in. It gives everyone the buy-in because they've been part of that decision. And like I said before, we are at this really great juncture whereby people respect the decision, even if it's not one that they necessarily agree with, because they had the opportunity to put their thoughts forward. One thing I forgot to mention in that conversation was we very clear about our strategic plan and what our growth options look like for the future. And earlier this year, we spent 3 days as a team in our very first week building our 2020 to 2022 strategic plan. And out of that fell a series of objectives and goals and tasks, if you like. And so because everybody was part of that, it wasn't just something that was delivered to people. we therefore have absolute buy-in from everybody about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And there is no secrets about that. Everybody in the business knows about the strategic plan and what it is we're working towards. And we measure that on every 4 months. So every quarter we have a 1 day, sit down, we review our strategic plan, review the goals that we set, and we do that as a collective. And it's also where we have some of these tough conversations, such as titles, such as offices, etc. And again, by having a common goal that everyone's working towards, it means that they actually all believe in it as well, which is absolutely critical, which we don't see in traditional law firms because it is made at equity partner level and just fed down the tube, as opposed to everybody having an active involvement in that process.
But that connection between strategic plan and people, I've got to tell you, to my absolute amazement for my entire career associated in this industry, is more disconnected than connected, certainly in a traditional sense. I've never understood why the dots are not connected between the people that are actually going to deliver on that plan and the plan itself. So yeah, I just couldn't agree more just how critically important that is. And the space discussion at the moment is just, that you mentioned, is just huge, isn't it? I mean, we've seen another company in the last 24 hours indicate that they're basically giving up all of their office space. And they're going to go to some other model yet to be determined, but that's going to be a big one, isn't it, going forward for everybody?
And I wonder whether that was a decision made by the business based on finance, or whether it was a decision made based on consultation with the team.
For sure.
So I can tell you, when we had the conversation with our team, everybody wants to go back to the office.
Yeah.
It might be we might do 3 days, 4 days. And as you know, Terri, I'm extremely flexible, and the team are very flexible in the way that we work anyway. But people want to be together. They want to be part of something. And we're just missing that at the moment through COVID. Whilst we are on Zooms every day and everything else, actually people want to be back in the office, and they want a collaborative space, and they want their own desk space. These are conversations that we're having. And yeah, I'm hearing about businesses, not too dissimilar to the one that we were just referring to, who are just giving up space and say, actually, everyone's working from home full time now. That's a decision made on finance. It's not a decision made on practicality. And it's not a decision putting culture first, because I truly believe in order to build a really strong and important culture within a business, you need people to be together for that.
Yeah. And for as great as the tech is, and it is great and it's getting better, there's still something special about being physically together in one space, right?
I can tell you, yesterday I went and met up for a coffee with my assistant, who is absolutely a wonderful human, and we haven't seen each other since March. And we speak to each other 3 times a day over Zoom, on the call. But yesterday I got to see her in person, and it was just so different. It was just so nice to see her in person, despite me speaking to her 3 times a day. It was just a really warm, kind of time and connection to be together again. I know that sounds a bit utopian again and a bit kind of warm and fuzzy, but those who aren't in Melbourne, we can't describe that disconnected feeling that we have here at the moment. And so it's no surprise to me that people want to get back to the office. And I think firms and businesses who are making those decisions to reduce their footprint and not encourage people to come back in any capacity, even if it's part-time, flexible, etc. But those who are saying, no, working from home is a new normal, I think are going to actually regret that decision in a few years' time. Yeah. And also the other piece to that is most people aren't set up to work from home properly. We've got team members who are working in lounge rooms, working at their dining room tables, working in their bedrooms. This is not an environment that people want to be working in for the rest of their life. Most people don't have a nice big house in the suburbs with a study that they can just close the door of an afternoon and go somewhere else. They've actually just got 2 screens set up on their, on their desk, on their table, or wherever else it might be. And there is going to have to be this separation again at some point. And I think when you are forcing the business into somebody's constant living arrangement, that's just going to cause complications as we move forward. At the moment, it's accepted because there is no other alternative. But certainly once things ease up, particularly here in Melbourne, I just can't see it being something that's accepted. Yeah,
big conversations ahead, and our hearts go out to you, by the way, and everyone in Victoria. You folks are certainly doing it tough. Demetrio, I wanted to ask you two questions to kind of reluctantly close. One of them is, how did you come up with the name Law Squared? I've always wanted to ask you that question, so I'm going to do it now.
Funny. So those who don't know the story, I'll indulge for a little moment, but I finished up my last firm at the end of 2015 and kind of was not in the greatest space. I kind of wasn't sure what the future held for me and what I wanted to do. And so I ended up going to Bali. And I went to Bali for about 4.5 weeks. And over the course of those 4.5 weeks, I had different people kind of fly in and visit. And I had two of my really good friends and a little baby come up, and I had bought this big whiteboard and put it in the villa that I was staying at, and, you know, on the villa, and I was just mapping out what the business was going to, and the business didn't have a name. It was called, so, you know, in our billing code days, back in the day, it was DDZ was my billing code. And so the firm was called DDZ until I could work out what the name was going to be. And I came across this kind of notion of squaring a circle. And so I'm not sure who is familiar with that, but there is this idea that you can't fit a circle into a square, which is essentially doing the impossible. How do you do that? And so that really resonated with me, you know? And so I had this kind of like squaring the circle on top of the whiteboard. And under that, it was just like names. And so I had square, circle, triangle, you know, all these kind of different things. And my friend walked in, he'd come back from the pool, and he just said, "What are you doing?" I was just like, "I'm just trying to come up with a name, and I really like square and I really like circle." And he's, you know, maybe like square, circle, law. And he was like, "That's ridiculous. You know, the dumbest name I've ever heard." And he's like, "What about law squared?" I was like, "That's cool." He's like the next dimension of law. And I was like, "That's even cooler." I was just like, "Okay, we've got a name. That's going to be a working prototype name." And so literally I called it Law Squared based on that conversation that I had with my friend, because I couldn't quite work out how this notion of squaring a circle could be put into a name. And so when we now look at Law Squared, it really is that next dimension of law. It is a different way of a firm practicing and operating. And yeah, that's the genesis of the name.
Fantastic. I love it. Glad I asked the question. We've got another question here for you as well. What's the relationship between you and your team members? You know, is it employment, partnership, commission-based? And in other words, how do they get paid?
Yeah, of course. So it's absolutely 100% employment. So again, like we said earlier, this is not a partnership model. This is not a contractor model. This is building a business, and we operate like any corporate or business does. So everyone is full-time, salaried employees. People have various incentives. Those incentives, though, are not finance-based, which is really important to note, because we don't believe in setting individual financial metrics for people. But absolutely, no, everyone is an employee of Law Squared and part of the vision of growing the business.
Fantastic. My last question for you is this. I want you to take yourself back to basically where you started. Put yourselves in the shoes of folks that might be listening to you today, who want to do something different in this current environment and looking forward. Maybe want to start their own law firm, maybe want to set up a service that could be productized. What would be your advice to them based on your experience and frankly having been there and done it and still doing it, because you're agile and changing and ducking and weaving as you go kind of every day?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest, running a business is hard work. And running a law firm is particularly challenging because not only do you have, even as a solo lawyer, not only do you have the obligations to your clients, but you also have quite heavily regulatory obligations as well, which you must consider at all times. When I started Law Square, a little bit of a different time, because NewLaw wasn't really, and I know it sounds like way back when, when I was a child, but it's true. 5 years ago, the legal landscape was very different to what it is now. NewLaw wasn't really a thing. We had 3 or 4, the concept had kind of been born. We had 3 or 4 law firms maybe in Australia who had put themselves out there as being new law firms. And primarily, to be honest, they were partners from big firms who had picked up and just moved their practices and put a new name on themselves. They weren't necessarily doing things differently. There are 2 firms that I can actively think of that were really trying to do things differently at that time, but they still had a very different philosophy to me. Why I say that is because now, fast forward 5 years, there are probably 30, 40 new law firms there are even more than that legal technology and innovation firms. And so rather than thinking about, I'm going to go out and do my own thing, it's look at what is already there and see something that you can add value to. Each of us in this space, are looking to grow by having the right people be part of us. And that's not to say don't set up a competitor. I'm all for people coming into this new way of working and creating businesses that offer and operate in this new way. But I do just encourage people to dig a bit deeper in terms of saying, what is it the motivation behind you wanting to start a business? Is it because you want the freedom? Is it because you think it's financially rewarding? Is it because you want to work in a more agile environment? And I think if you start digging around, you might actually find other businesses that already exist that are aligned that you can add value to. And I would encourage people to have some of those open conversations. I'll be honest, I had those conversations before I started Law Squared to see if I was valued aligned to those businesses before starting my own. And I just encourage that because starting a business is hard work. Yes, it's rewarding, but I can tell you, I'm somebody who works 80 hours a week. I'm on a plane 3 or 4 days a week. Building a business and building a team has been absolutely hard work, and I have had to sacrifice lots of other things as a result. And yes, we now see the success in quotation marks, and really we're just getting started in that process, but that takes a lot, and you've got to sacrifice a lot in order to get there. And so I really do encourage people who are looking at doing things differently to research some of the other firms. And there are some exceptional businesses, new law firms, legal technology businesses who are doing some great things that you could probably add value to. And so have those conversations first before jumping out and doing your own thing.
It's not for the faint-hearted, but I think that you and Law Square proved that it is for the good-hearted. And, we're delighted to have you, Demetrio, and your firm as one of the friends of the centre. This has been another fantastic conversation. I wasn't expecting it to be anything else but. I really, really appreciate the time that you've given today as you do your contribution to the centre. So thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And certainly if anyone has any questions and wants to reach out, always happy to have a conversation and share some insights into what we're doing. Because like I said before, the more businesses and more firms we have who are doing things differently and who are changing the conversation that people have about lawyers, then we really want to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise. And folks, we'd like to thank all of you again for coming back and joining in and supporting this new series. We're always obviously delighted to have you here. So we will be back with this series next month in November. And at that point in time, we're going to be chatting with Hive Legal. But for now, and to close out this session, congratulations on Law Squared, Demetrio, and thank you very much again for your time today.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.